the amoeba at the bottom and the man at the top. You see, these long, extended periods of time have made this impossible idea seem like it could have happened. Now, the issue of time is very important for many creationists. And I'm often asked, how old do you think the Earth is? And I can honestly tell you, I do not know. And I don't know of any other person that knows how old the Earth is. Oh, many people claim they do. You've perhaps heard all of the scientific claims. Well, we know that the Earth is 4.51 billion years old. Well, how do they know that? Was anyone there in the beginning to start the clock? No. So there are a lot of assumptions go into the dating of the Earth. Now, it's interesting when you study the history behind evolution that the time concept actually began from a Hindu philosophy, believing in these long periods of time that allowed reincarnation to develop over hundreds of millions of years, process after process, lower to higher. But the idea was really popularized when this chart was put forward in the 1700s by James Hutton and, as we said earlier, Charles Lyell, who suggested that the layers of the Earth were formed by gradual events taking many millions of years to form. And so arbitrarily, this chart was put together trying to estimate the age of the Earth based upon the present being the key to the past. In other words, they stated that the same erosion that occurs today and the same amount of volcanic activity has always occurred at the same rate in the past as it occurs today. Again, that's not a scientific observation because we don't know what took place in the past. We weren't there to observe it. Now, again, if someone asks me, how old is the Earth? I say, I don't know, but as a Christian, I don't believe that we have a lot of time left. Things are happening around us which indicate things are winding down. We're living in very significant days. Now, with this issue of time, there have been a number of dating techniques which have caused many people to say, well, I believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Earth is billions of years old. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, because of radiometric dating. And so we've been told that methods such as uranium, lead, and potassium argon are very accurate as a Swiss watch. Now, first of all, we need to know what these dating methods state that they date. And uranium, lead, and potassium argon, radiometric dating methods, are designed to date the age of formation of volcanic materials. Only volcanic materials. Now, perhaps you have read some articles and you've heard some of the dates that radiometric dating techniques have performed. For example, here is Skull 1470, a famous fossil found by the Leakey family. And it's claimed to be nearly 3 million years old. Now, how did they date it? They did not date the skull. They dated volcanic rock in the surrounding layers. Or here's another fossil find, Lucy. It's also claimed to be in the area of 3 million years old. And also, it wasn't the fossil that was dated, it was the volcanic rock that was dated in the surrounding area. So we hear about all of these dates, and that they're supposedly very accurate. But let me tell you something, there are some problems with radiometric dating techniques. And let me illustrate to you some of those problems. From the Journal of Geophysical Research, Volume 73, July 15th, 1968, lava rocks that had been formed in Hawaii in 1800 and 1801, dated by potassium argon, showed an age of formation of 160 million to 3 billion years old. Or here's another one. Lunar soil dated from some of the Apollo tests. 4 different lead methods gave 4 different answers. 4.6 billion, 5.4 billion, 4.8 billion, 8.2 billion. And lunar rocks dated by potassium argon dated 2.3 billion from Science, Volume 167, January 30, 1970. Now here's a question that you should ask. If we can't date the formation of volcanic rocks of an age that we know it was formed, if we can't be confident about that, How do we know we can be confident about the age of formation of volcanic rocks when we don't know when it was formed? And I don't think we can be. We found when we were doing some of the research for our evolution film that if you take a volcanic rock to a radiometric lab, they won't date it unless you tell them what layer it was found in. In other words, they want to know how old it is, which gives me some idea that even the dating labs question the methods as well. Well, then there's carbon-14. And people often confuse the radiometric methods for dating volcanic rock with carbon-14, which dates the age of death of a specimen. So it dates organic material. When living things die at that moment, they do not take in carbon-14. And then through technological means, we're able to measure the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12. All living things contain a certain amount of carbon-14, which is either ingested through the food that is eaten or through the air that plants take into them. And radioactivity that occurs in the atmosphere as a result of cosmic radiation bombarding nitrogen atoms produces carbon-14. So the moment an organism dies, it does not take the carbon-14 into its system. And so they measure the ratio of C14 to C12, and knowing the half-life or the rate of degeneration, they determine the age of death. Now that all sounds very well, but it's based upon an assumption that carbon-14 has been constant in the atmosphere over time. Well, there's a problem with that. How do we know that it's been constant? Volcanic activity changes the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12. How do we know the rate of volcanic activity in the past? Cosmic catastrophes change the rate of carbon-14 to carbon-12. In 1918, in Siberia, in a place called Tanuska, something from the heavens slammed into the earth. They don't know what it was, whether it was an asteroid or a comet. It was like a nuclear explosion. And it flattened trees, just blasted them like a nuclear explosion in a radius of 30 miles. And the following year, carbon-14 in tree rings doubled all over the world. Or other reasons. Solar flare activity can change the rate of radioactivity and carbon-14 formation. Or we can look at another example, the pollution of our environment, and that's what's happening today. The ozone layer is depleting. As a result, radiation is intensifying, and carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratios are changing. So there are some problems. And again, when we look at measurements, we see that it also illustrates problems. For example, organic material in mortar that was in a castle that was built 785 years before this dating method was taken actually was built 7,370 years previously. So there was a problem there. Or seals that had been freshly killed, dated that they had been dead for 1,300 years. Or coal that had been dated by carbon-14, dated 1,680 years old in the age of formation, when it actually, by the geological time scale, was supposed to have been 100 million years. Evolutionists believe that the complexity of life can be explained by a process that has taken place over time, chance and random events. So evolution believes that every living thing that we see around us on our Earth can be explained by a natural process. But is that logical? Is it reasonable to say that complex life can just come onto the scene by process and then develop over time through accumulations of mistakes? Well, let's look at the very simplest component of life, the single cell, which is the basic unit of life, but it's not simple. And as we look at the cell and we see the many structures which make up the cell in the cytoplasm, the various organelles, we see that the cell can't function unless each one of these organelles is present, all of which have specific functions. Did this happen by chance? Now, while we're looking at this particular slide, this picture has a very important thing for me because it was this particular picture that I looked at about 15 years ago which caused me to question what I believed. You see, one night I was sitting in my living room and I was looking around. I saw a painting. The thought came to me, oh, the painting had an artist. I looked down on the table. A biology textbook that I had been reading from was sitting there. And the thought came to me, the book had an author. And the amoeba at the bottom and the man at the top. You see, these long, extended periods of time have made this impossible idea seem like it could have happened. Now, the issue of time is very important for many creationists. And I'm often asked, how old, as we said earlier, Charles Lyell, who suggested that the layers of the earth were formed by gradual events taking many millions of years to form. And so, arbitrarily, this chart was put together trying to, how old do you think the earth is? And I can honestly tell you, I do not know. And I don't know of any other person that knows how old the earth is. Oh, many people claim they do. You've perhaps heard all of the scientific claims. Well, we know that the earth is 4.51 billion years old. Well, how do they know? The Hindu philosophy, believing in these long periods of time that allowed reincarnation to develop over hundreds of millions of years, process after process, lower to higher. But the idea was really popularized when this chart was put forward in the 1700s by James Hutton. And was anyone there in the beginning to start the clock? No. So there are a lot of assumptions go into the dating of the earth. Now, it's interesting when you study the history behind evolution that the time concept actually began from a